Hey everyone, I'm back. Yay. Thank you. And thanks to the guys here for and Anthony and everybody else who chipped in while I was away. I've been traveling. We traveled 5,600 miles.
Thank you. Thanks to the guys.
1 second. Crap, that would be me probably.
No.
No. Sorry.
Me. Sorry.
It's
Okay, so I traveled 5,600 miles. And yeah, it was incredible. I mean, if you never get a chance to do something like this, it's just like, I drove to Yellowstone National Park with my family and drove back
all the way.
Yeah, all the way. So everybody, we took Interstate I-80-90 across. So we took the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the quick version, Pennsylvania Turnpike up to Interstate 80-90 up to Madison, Wisconsin, across 90, down at Wall Drugs, famous Wall Drugs in South Dakota, which is like it's like south of the border toward.
Oh yeah, well I know exactly where you mean.
Right. Yeah. So down to Devil's Tower, into the Badlands, which is amazing. Devil's Tower, which was like just unbelievable. We camped at Devil's Tower, where they do show every night on a giant screen in front of Devil's Tower, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is so much fun. Yeah. For the campsite, and then to Yellowstone for 3 days, where we did Tetons National Park and Yellowstone. Had our tent fly away while we were setting it up at Devil's Tower, which was the funniest story. We were sitting there, we're trying to set up. We're not campers by any stretch of the imagination. We only camped a couple times on the trip. Mostly we were in hotels, but we set up a tent. A windstorm came up, lifted our tent above our truck all the way, and the tent went like 100 yards that way, right towards a campfire, which was awesome. It didn't catch fire, amazingly, but somehow we managed to get it set up. Yeah, then all through Yellowstone, Tetons just incredibly beautiful, like a herd of bison surrounding the car. At one point, moose, bears, everything.
Did they sell bison burgers?
Yeah, they do, which is really kind of messed up. They're everywhere. You can bison burgers are everywhere too. Yeah. To Jackson, Wyoming, then to Denver, Colorado, then across Kansas, which is hilarious because talk about a flat long drive across Kansas on 70. To St. Louis, where I spent some time there. My daughter saw University of Washington, St. Louis, which is a really good school. And they are interested in her probably maybe for soccer, and also but it's academically, it's like an Ivy League school. It's really tough, and but she's all about academics. And then we stopped at Columbus yesterday. We were at the Columbus Zoo, and got a tour backstage of the Columbus Zoo because of friends of mine there, and it was so incredible. Like, I got to turn that off. Sorry, my voice is going crazy. But yeah, the Columbus Zoo was just the people at the Columbus Zoo. There's actually a show on Nat Geo about the Columbus Zoo, which I didn't realize, called The Secrets of the Zoo, which is like a really good reality show. And having met all the people now, like, I've never seen it before, so I met all the people yesterday and then watched it today. It was hilarious because I met all these people.
Were there any animals in the Columbus Zoo? Because I know that most of them went to, or everybody else left for the Florida Panthers and
yeah, they don't believe in Florida Panthers in the Columbus Zoo. No, it's funny. I was talking to the guy who was taking us around was actually good friends with the Jackets, and had taken Panarin, who loved to hang out with like the baby cheetahs and stuff like that. Panarin, he said, just loves animals. Panarin and his girlfriend, and then
so they help you at home with the Ranger fans.
I know, and yeah, exactly, and JD and all the. It was just amazing. It was really something. And Bobrovsky, bringing his parents who are from like Siberia, just incredible stuff. So it was, and then driving home, got home early in the morning yesterday. Kind of slept through much of the day after getting a blog out and everything like that. So so I'm happy to be back, guys. Thanks so much. If you never do, it's funny when you do that kind of driving. You do get into a zone after a while, it's just fun. I mean, you did it when you went out. You drove out to St. Louis, Russ. You just get in this thing. Like, by the time you get home, you think you'd be happy to get home because thank God I'm home. But there's like a point at which your body says, "Let's just keep going."
Yeah, because you psych yourself into it.
You know what I mean? It's like, all right, let's. I'm like, we went across on 80-90, came back on 70. I'm like, let's go back on 60 and then come back on 50.
I never get that way. I have a 5.5 hour drive ahead of me tomorrow, and I'm like, I can't wait for it to end.
Oh my God. Saturday morning, I'm getting up and leaving at 5:30 in the morning, and we're driving all the way to the BC border. And then and we do this every year. And, I'm lucky. I've got a nice VW camper van. So we're going to have a couple stops along the way in the mountains and do some things. But yeah, this isn't like,
yeah,
this is sort of an annual thing that myself, my wife, and one of our kids, because they're the ones, he's not coming, do. And we go out there, visit family and friends. But, it's funny. You talk about that as like it's an adventure, and it is. When you live out in the prairies, and even if you have to go from Toronto to Northern Ontario, it's a long drive.
Yes.
And sometimes there's a lot of nothing in between.
Oh yeah.
I mean, pre-show. My quick pre-show is, so I happen to have Sports Center on for a minute, and so they have this thing called Sports Center Coast to Coast. They have 2 different hosts, and they show like top 10 videos. So the number 10 video was a hockey video. The problem was they kept jibber jabbering from the segment before, and so then, and I forget her name, then the female host tries to make up for it, and she goes, oh yeah, Jason Zucker on a breakaway, but she didn't say breakaway, she said something else that was a little bit wrong, and then he roofs the shot, but she's like, well, he's in summer league hockey in Minnesota, so they don't even say the name of the league, the beauty league.
Yeah.
And she goes, and he decks the goalie and scores the goal instead of Deke. And I'm thinking, you've got 2 people on this panel. Not one of them knew a hockey term. Like, couldn't somebody put like a phonetical pronunciation in there if you've got people that don't know sports? Seriously.
Yeah. So
you're so right. You're so
another
right.
little funny thing last night, and this is kind of ties into someone you've met before, and music and hockey. Last night was a national, it was in the United States and Canada, screening of a documentary on Fish guitarist Trey Anastasio, and it's called Between Me and My Mind. So I went and saw the movie in the theater here in Winnipeg with my nephew and a friend of his who are both into the band. There were 6 people in Winnipeg seeing this movie. But it talks about Trey playing hockey growing up. I know he's done back in the 90s. He's done some charity work with the Flyers, and he grew up watching the Rangers. And he can often be seen at Rangers games because he lives in New York, in Greater New York. But it talks about his dad and what he learned from his dad as a hockey coach. And he said his dad was really hard on him, and he always was trying to feel like he could never live up to it. And he sort of, what's really interesting is in the documentary, it focuses on his creative work ethic. And as a musician, what that's like. There are days when you want to work and you can't do anything because the creativity isn't there. And it is a job. It's not just, I think I'll compose something. There is a lot of energy and brain power that goes into artistic creation. And he sort of they show him talking to his dad later on about that inspiration of how his dad drove him to work as a creative person because of what he learned through hockey and his coaching in hockey. It was really cool. That's something I didn't know about a band I followed for almost 30 years.
So I've spoken to a lot of different music things over the years about creativity and writing because I'm a writer, and it's funny. Yeah, you're right about. Creativity is tricky for sure. We all deal with it. We all have to blog every day, so we all have to come up with something. And it depends on what. And creativity is no different. Music, writing, about hockey, anything like that. It's all. As far as when you come up with songs like that, that's quite often like you're looking for inspiration, and how much inspiration can you get? There's only so much inspiration you can get out of life. Sometimes, sometimes, and that's why most of the songs that majority of songs are sad songs, because that's an obvious thing. It'll inspire you. If something hits you tough in life, you'll write about it because it hit you tough and you realize it. But I always tried to keep away from that. And I always tried to write more positive songs, like the band Yes did, which is one of the reasons that they were had their name Yes being a positive word. So I do believe in that, because it is easier to write sad songs. But there's a great if you ever get a chance to see there's a podcaster who used to be very big back in the early days of YouTube, called Z Frank, which is ZEFRANK. And Z Frank stuff is incredible, and he talks a lot about creativity. And he's got one of the coolest things ever that I ever heard him. He has this great speech called 0 to 1, which is no question. If anybody who's creative knows that is the biggest leap, right? Like it's like getting that first thing down, going from no idea at all to an idea is by far bigger than trying to get anything else, done. because once you start writing, you can continue writing, and that's something that but it's just starting can be painful as hell. So that can really be painful. So yeah, Z Frank, watch his podcast. I mean, and he's actually, I turned on our friend Jillian Fisher to Z Frank, and she actually takes a lot of different things from Z Frank's style, and you'll see there's a lot of that cool stuff that's in there, and it's really just it's amazing. I mean, the creative process is just insane, and it is about work. There's no question about it. It's work. It's work every day. It's work it's work when you're a hockey writer too, and then people, and it's great work. I mean, we don't complain, but it's great work. But it's work.
But it's still work.
It's still work to do something every day, to be responsible every day for something.
The only thing I have to contribute, and then we can start the show, is I'm going to see ELO tonight in Toronto.
Oh, nice!
Phenomenal. Very enthused on that one. Picked up a ticket on StubHub, and
based on my recommendation, now if they stink, he's going to kill me.
No,
I've heard good things about the tour.
No,
I've heard great things too. I was going to go to it for myself.
I actually saw them. Saw like a YouTube of them. I saw the videos that you posted, but I saw a YouTube of them playing Mr. Blue Sky, and it was like note perfect. So I have no doubts it's going to be a great show. No, I'm basically, my seat is in Oakville, so I think
you'll enjoy it. That's amazing. All right, guys, let's get going here.
Great tour.
All right, yeah, and geez, he should have been on. Like I said many times, there's the guy who, if anybody, when John Lennon was shot, the first thing I thought about was, if there's anybody that's ever going to replace John Lennon and the Beatles, it would have been Jeff Lynne. I thought Jeff Lynne could have been, but
he did his own thing.
He did his own thing. He could have been the other Beatle, though. Anyway, here we go. Mm-hmm. Hello, Hockey World. It is, let's call it Thursday. It's Thursday, July 18th, 2019.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Tessier in balmy Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And
Frank will be happy, Peter, that you said balmy.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to be back. I saw the signs as I was driving along, Manitoba. It was pretty cool to see. I was thinking of you, Peter. I'm driving along, through Wisconsin. I'm like, Manitoba. Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And we are back. Yeah. So I'm happy to be back. There's lots to talk about. There's tons of different rumors going on. There's all sorts of things. I wanted to start today with my blog today, which touches with, and I wanted to get Peter's opinion on this, because the one thing while I was away, I was talking to people, because you have plenty of time in the car to talk to people. And the one thing that I heard over and over again was people, no matter who you talk to, whether they're in LA, St. Louis, whether they're in Dallas, whether they're in Florida, they all talk about the Montreal Canadiens and Patrik Laine as like a thing. And I know it's been brought out, other people in the press. I honestly have to admit, didn't read any hockey press while I was away, except for the stuff that I wrote. But so I don't know if it's been brought out or not, but I think I'm sure it has, because it's been talked about so much, Patrik Laine. And now it's being discussed as if, this would be a trade. This would not be an offer sheet.
Well, it can't be an offer sheet, and I'll let Peter talk about this because it's Winnipeg, and he knows a lot more about them than I do. But just looking at the numbers, the Canadiens don't have the room to make an offer sheet that another team would match. After the signings that they've made, after extending Lehkonen and Armia and Paul Byron, they're down to $4.8 million in cap. Now they can move things around. They can go 10% over during the summer,
and they can, and they will.
But
I think it's scary sometimes. Like, not to disagree with you, but I will, because, and the reason I say it is this: look at the Bruins right now, for example. Like, the Bruins have $7 million in cap space, and have to sign McAvoy and
Carlo.
Right, and Carlo. I mean, you're talking like, $15 million there, probably. Maybe.
Well,
12 million.
No.
I mean, let's go conservative. 12 million. They're still $5 million over.
No,
right? If they sign both for $6 million, or if they sign McAvoy for $7 and Carlo for $5.
No, Carlo is going to end up being a bridge. According to Cap Friendly, they have $8 million in cap space. They're going to sign one of them to a bridge, and McAvoy to a long-term extension if their aim is that way. Now they have moves to make. They could buy out David Backes if they have the.
I think they're going to do, and I talked about that at the NHL the finals, right? And I know they have said they're not going to do it, but I do think they're going to do it. And I think they have no choice. I think they have to do it.
Yeah, they're pretty much in a corner now.
I don't think they wanted to do it right after the finals because of the way it would have been viewed upon. But I think that, and so when I look at that, I say Canadians, okay, the Canadians have $5 million. You're right, and that's definitely the case. But I just think that in July, to look at cap space issues, it's just so tricky. Like for us to look there and say, because there's so many things that can change. There's so many things that can shift. They're going to have to trade players to Winnipeg. So there's going to be money going back. It's not going to be, I don't know how much money it's going to be, but say Max Domi's involved in this, which is possible, very possible. I've heard. Mm-hmm. So if Domi's going to Winnipeg, say that's already a lot of money there.
I just pulled up Cap Friendly just to take a look at it and stuff, and the offer sheet is a tool to maybe force other things to happen.
Right. And that's what's happening.
And maybe you use that and they could offer sheet Laine and then figure out the cap things otherwise.
Sure.
In other ways. And they could also offer sheet Laine knowing they have a deal in place to dump salary.
Right.
Or whatever. There's a way to do it. I don't know if Laine makes a strategic fit for the Canadians if they have to get rid of Domi. That's the problem there. Right. But I'd love the idea of Max Domi coming to the Jets. Would be a very interesting proposition given the level of wingers that the Jets have as opposed to centers.
Right.
And so there's intrigue there.
The reason I'm skeptical is because, I mean, let's assign Domi. Let's say there's a trade worked out and Domi is going one way, Laine is going the other. Domi played center last year for the Canadians. He played it well. Now they have good youngsters. They have Paling coming. Kotkaniemi played really well last year as a rookie. I don't know if Suzuki is going to be an NHL center, but he had another really good year.
They think he is from talking to people.
So, okay. But you're weakening yourself up the middle, and this is an organization that was desperate to move Drouin to center, and that was a failure. It was a success. Yeah. It was a success with Domi. It was a failure with Galchenyuk. It doesn't add up to me that they're going to move a guy who can effectively play center for a winger as good as Laine is. So that's why I'm a little skeptical of this.
I think. No, go ahead, Russ. Go ahead.
I'm skeptical just because of what Montreal would have to pay. And Bergevin doesn't like to pay those kinds of salaries, so I don't think it's going to happen based on that.
There's I can understand where you're coming from, Russ.
The other player going back
right now, other than Carey Price, we remove him from the conversation. Who's the highest salary player that Bergevin?
Right, but remember, Montreal, you got to look at this marketplace, okay?
Shea Weber.
You can't. Well, yeah, was Shea Weber, right? But they didn't sign their contract. Obviously,
sign the deal,
right? But Montreal is a star-driven market. Okay,
they have a GM that doesn't believe in it.
No, they don't believe in it because they haven't had a star. They haven't been able to get a star, and they tried to get a star in Shea Weber. They actually I think do believe, and and Subban had his own set of stuff that there was too much baggage between the organization and him at that point. But when Price is the perfect example. Like Price is a star, they will pay their stars, and they will pay
a goalie star. Yes, they always will do that.
But I think they'll also. I think this is a market that loves flash. They love scorers. They love. This is a place where Laine they will pay.
Laine want that. The GM doesn't.
I don't agree.
Look, I think because they made an offer sheet to Aho. You factor in Laine's finish. They got Kotkaniemi. They've had Koivu as a captain.
They've got
There's just a lot of things that say, hey, this could be a guy. And I think it's a fun talking point. The interesting thing with Laine is that all things are pointing to, and I just put a blog up today for the first time in a while because I've had to sit back and kind of really take a look at what's going on with the Jets and why things are kind of quiet. I think all things point to Laine in that there is probably a discussion point with him and his agent to Cheveldayoff that says, okay, we're willing to sign. We may want to bridge or we may want to go 5 years or something like that. But the amount and Patrik signing has a lot to do about how he's being used. And you have to address that with Paul Maurice. And I think that's what's slowing this down.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you watch the way he's,
I think you're right.
I think that's the sticking point.
Well,
I think
it's
they can
definitely
hit
a
the
factor.
numbers,
Yeah.
the dollar's fine. It's you've got to give him a reason to believe that he's going to get a fair shot, and you're going to do things to diversify your top 6 forwards to make sure that he's not stuck with a center that doesn't work with him.
Right. Or a coach that
until that happens, they're probably sitting there twiddling their thumbs.
Right. I mean, or a coach he just doesn't like, like.
Okay, but all right, but inherently, you're now talking about a problem that a 21-year-old may have with a center and a coach. That doesn't go well.
I'm not talking about a problem. I'm talking. So Russ,
no, but it is.
Well, it is.
Oh, no, it
if
is.
you're going to sign long term, if Kevin Cheveldayoff says, "Well, Patrick, we'll give you 8 years at $7.5 million," you're probably like, "Okay, great." But if I'm locking myself into this, and I might be in a place that I don't like, the system doesn't work, or it doesn't like. These are how this generation thinks about things now.
Right.
And
it's more of an NBA. It's more of an NBA.
20 years ago, Russ, that conversation never happens unless you were Joe Sakic.
I think this is more of an agent thing than
and the agent the agent should be looking out for his client.
But
and I'm going on what the information is here. The idea that Elliot Friedman in his podcast said that Laine had issues with the Jets leadership.
Yeah.
Paul Edmonds, who is the radio voice of the Jets, said on air this week in Winnipeg that Wheeler and Scheifele found playing with Laine difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Wheeler and Scheifele, they never had them up on that line, only on the power play, and they wouldn't split them apart to diversify the lines. There's something here. There's too much smoke around this. And my thinking is, if Laine was going to commit to a deal, he probably wants a bridge to see if this stuff gets sorted out. And Chevy's got to sort out, because they're going to have their postmortem of the season. The Jets did not do what they wanted to do this at the end of the season, nor in the playoffs.
Right.
There's way too much smoke around. There were problems with player usage. Tyler Myers in his press conference in Vancouver said he was frustrated with his usage in Winnipeg.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's something there.
Maurice issues, which I think if they get off to a slow start, they'll get rid of Maurice and there won't be an issue. But you're talking about a franchise guy, and we're getting almost the same talk, just not museum talk, like Dougie Hamilton. And so it is hard to lock up a guy and do that based on the fact that right now he's a one-dimensional goal scorer, and now all of a sudden I'm going to have trouble fitting him in with other guys. Like that's problematic.
No,
it is.
I agree with that. Patrik Laine's got to work on some things. He's got to work. He's got to come back and start taking the skating seriously.
Yeah.
Like that's a given. But if you're his agent and you know these things, let's just say all the stuff that came out at the end of the year for the Jets is true. We don't know what the facts are, but there's issues, there's this, there's that. And you come out of the season and you got a contract coming up. You go and talk to your agent. What the hell happened this year? Or maybe you're talking to your agent throughout the year. And your agent's like, I've got to make sure this kid's getting a fair shake so that he can maximize his potential, because it also maximizes my earnings.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of things at play here. And I think we don't know what they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if these issues are part of the conversations going on right now around this contract.
But the thing is this is across the spectrum. The offer sheet is being used as a leverage play, not as a realistic goal for all of these restricted free agents. The stuff that came out about Marner last week was a total load of crap. Because essentially I'm willing to sign an offer. Columbus wanted him on an offer sheet, but Columbus justifiably wanted him for 7 years. Marner's not interested in that. Marner wants a 4-year deal because he wants to walk to free agency or get as close to free agency as possible. And no one in their right mind is signing one of these guys and letting them walk at age 25. So offer sheets are not happening.
Well, I have a thing for Peter to stay on course for a minute with Laine.
Yeah.
So yesterday, the Flyers surprisingly announced that Michel Therrien is actually in charge of the forwards, and Mike Yeo is actually in charge of the defensemen. They're doing exactly the opposite.
Excuse me, I have to go and be ill for a bit. I'll be right back.
And,
I can hear that, Russ, because like I said, I've been ignoring the media. So there you go.
And part of this has to do with teaching, Travis Konechny and others how to play defense. Why don't the Jets do this? I don't understand.
Welcome to AV coaching.
Right.
This is Alain Vignon 101.
Correct.
And it will either work spectacularly or this, given the two assistant coaches, will implode like a submarine going too deep.
Welcome to the machine.
But what I'm saying is, why doesn't Winnipeg do that? It's nice to go out there and shoot, and it's fun to score, but Laine has to do more for his team.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think I look, there's a segment of people in Winnipeg who, some are writers, bloggers, whatever, who are questioning some of the decisions the assistant coaches like Charlie Huddy does the defense makes, and his teaching and his tactics and how they fit with what Paul Maurice is doing. And there's some who have some concerns with Compton, who is the he does the PP and forwards.
Yeah.
But Maurice is a little more involved in the forwards than he is, and Compton does the power play. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like that's something that it needs to be looked at, and there needs to be, when you're going to do a draft and develop model and you're going to have players that are young and you're going to let them learn, you can't stop teaching them as they learn. You can't say, well, we've taught you everything, now you just got to do it and feel it out. You've got to still teach. And guys who've only been in the league 3 years, unless you're the God-gifted McDavid, Matthews types, right? The super elites, you're always learning.
Yeah.
And even those guys continue to learn.
Oh no, you're right.
And so you're right, Russ. I totally agree.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but just finishing up on Laine.
Unpack the Flyers part. Let's go.
All right, let's
do that.
Let's unpack the Flyers part in 1 second. So I want to finish up on Laine for 1 minute. And that would be the difference between rumors and gossip, right? Which is something we always have to kind of talk about this time of year, because there's a lot of gossip that's out there. And the stuff that you're talking about, like with Scheifele and Wheeler, gossip, right? That's gossip. Yeah. And that's fine. And gossip can, I find that rumors are either right or wrong, and gossip tends to be partially right, but usually wrong. Usually wrong, but with some element of it that's right. And that element of it is not. So I don't ever report on gossip, as you guys know. I never write about it. I get tons of it. I mean, if I told you the amount of emails I get with gossip, it's insane.
But half of it's about Mike Ojello.
Right. Yeah. Of course. And Mike's, wild party escapades and stuff like that. But besides that, besides Mike's wild nights with women, the other gossip that I get is,
come on over.
Yeah, it's a lot of a lot of different players, and and the gossip that's the worst of all gossip are gossips in markets like Winnipeg. Like Winnipeg, Buffalo, Ottawa.
Ottawa's crazy for gossip.
Ottawa's nuts. Winnipeg's nuts. Buffalo. These are these small towns where hockey is kind of king, and they're not small, but they're smaller. Like Columbus has the potential to do this, but it has never done it. But these, especially the Canadian markets, there's no two ways about it. Winnipeg and Ottawa kind of stand alone. And they are both, because there's only so many bars in town. There's only so many places the players can go. There's only so many things there's only so many places the fans can go. They're going to run into each other. They're going to see things. They're going to report stuff back. Right. I think that, when you hear that stuff like Wheeler and Scheifele, it's probably, knowing Blake Wheeler, I can't imagine it's true, but at the same time, I'm sure that there's an element of it that other players on the team probably said, they saw something like this and they would report it as their perception of how Wheeler and Scheifele saw them. I mean, that feels like how.
That's a really great way of taking it, Ek.
That's how it could play out, because and Scheifele and Wheeler are no nonsense leaders, and younger players who don't necessarily understand how they're leading, because they would be leading with Laine they would be hard asses to Laine. There's no question about it. Like, Scheifele and Wheeler would be tough on Laine. But they also wouldn't have the thing where they don't want to play with them. They wouldn't have that kind of stuff going on. But it would appear that way, right? So with gossip, you have to really, really be careful. like Maurice is another one who just seems to have gossips around him all the time wherever he coaches. And he is incredibly polarizing as far as coaches go. As to there are people that'll go to the wall for Maurice, and there are people who swear that he's the worst person they've ever met, not just coach, but person they've ever met on the planet. So you have like opposite ends of the spectrum with Paul Maurice, and it's a shame because again, extremes are never really true, but there's things that have happened. Don't hate the person, hate what they do, kind of things. That Maurice is not a bad person, but he does do stuff to certain players. And when he gets on the wrong side of a player, that player knows it in a big way. And that player almost never recovers from it. That in my experience, like I can't remember a situation really where one of Maurice's players went through something like Laine just went through this year and recovered from it. And if I'm Laine's agent, I know that. Like Laine's agent would know that more than we would know that.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So you're not going to see. So the recovering aspect of that is. So I think Laine's thing is tightly tied to Maurice. You can sit there and say that he's like you can sit there and say Maurice is like being a prima or Laine's being a prima donna for it. I don't really think that's it. I think it's the agent saying, listen, we know what's going on, and we know the way Maurice works. I had so-and-so who Maurice coached, and that never worked out. I had so-and-so, and that never worked out. And I don't trust Maurice to help Laine in his career. He's at a hugely important point of his development. And to me, that's how this thing's going. And then it comes back as like Laine doesn't want to play for Paul Maurice, which I don't think is the case. I think it's just that Paul Maurice he's too young to make that decision. But his agent is telling him, what absolutely happens. What straight, sorry, throwing something like that into our chat room. I'm trying. Was that what Russ just threw in our chat room? I'm like, kind of.
Was the plane flown by Dave Matthews?
Hold on. Plane accidentally emptied toilet tank over cruise ship, 23 injured. Okay.
What a shitstorm.
Oh boy. All right. So that's my little speech on gossip, right? And I think that's what you have to look at this time of year. There's so much gossip. Like another gossip thing is like so and so's house is for sale, whatever. There's the kind of stuff. It's just like makes me insane. It's not rumors, but it usually has some element of it that's at least it is a smoke. Gossip tends to be where there's smoke, there's fire, but not usually, but like 1/10 of how much it appears to be. So it's not as big as it is.
Two things though. One on this conversation, and just to put a capper on it. Many people think that most of these RFAs, in fact, all of them, are not going to get settled until just before training camp. That we're going to go through August.
That's really apparent right now.
Yeah, and nobody's going to drop off. Nobody. I mean, I've heard everybody is waiting for Marner to get done so they can use that as a measurable. And
but Mike, let me stop you for 1 second on Marner because I do have some Marner news on this, and I wrote about it while I was away at some point. The Leafs aren't okay with that. I think a lot of teams think this is happening. Like I think in Colorado with Rantanen, yeah, they think that's going to go. Laine is going to go for a while. Provorov is going to go forever. That's something that I really do see. But I have heard very distinctly that the Leafs have put a deadline on Marner for the end of July, that they want to know what's going on, and they want, you almost get the impression that they want an offer sheet thrown at him in a weird way. I think that Leafs just want
because I mean, as Aaron Portzline said, they're going to, everybody know, and this is the thing, the Blue Jackets were convinced, and I believe most teams are, that any offer, unless it's ridiculous, unless it's McDavid money, they're matching. They have the flexibility, so they'll do it. But I think Kyle Dubas has some business he still wants to accomplish.
He does.
Namely, there are some veteran defensemen out there. Right now, their bottom pairing for the start of the season until Travis Dermott gets back will be horrendous.
But they may not be there by the beginning of August.
Right, exactly.
And when he's sitting there saying, okay, guys, we moved Kadri. We moved, Zaitsev. We made these moves that we had to make to open up space for you, Mitch Marner. And if you're not going to be here, and if you're not returning, or you're holding out for even half a year or whatever it's going to be, and we've moved these players out, we are not a better team than we were last year at all. And the reality is, without Mitch Marner, Kadri, and Zaitsev, I don't care that you got a great defenseman, which you did get from Colorado.
No, I actually think they're a better team this year than they are if they get Marner signed. If they get
Marner signed, but without Marner signed, there's no question they aren't, right?
They're going to get Marner signed.
They're going to get Marner signed. I agree with you, but but I do not think that they are going to stand. I think that for what other teams are going to allow happen, like other teams are going to let this go longer. Toronto at some point is going to go play hardball with them. Is what I'm saying. At some point, that's going to happen because they are frustrated. They're annoyed. They keep hearing rumors. Even yesterday, a new rumor of an imminent offer sheet coming. It's insane. And the offer sheet rumors, no one buys it. Like you said, Mike, no one thinks that anyone's going to sign offers, but they're real, and they are real issues. They're mostly being driven by agents, I believe, but not all of them. Like I wrote one about Buffalo that I know. Mike, immediately you texted me, there's no way they could do it, and I understand why, seeing all the things we know right now, that they couldn't do it, right? But mine I've been ignoring the offer rumors from agents because I know that what they're doing. I know the game they're playing, right? But this one came right from within the Leafs organization itself, which is something that they don't want to admit to. So this is like, to me, there's no question that they are in a spot with Marner that they have to get answers, and they need to get it right now if they're going to improve this year as a team, or else this whole thing is pointless.
I mean, I was told by somebody that the Leafs will not allocate $1 to one other player until Marner.
I completely agree with that, and I think I have heard that they have told Marner that, and by telling Marner that puts a lot of pressure on them.
And that means, like what, as you referred to PTOs in your blog today, that means they're limited to offering PTOs to veteran players. And a guy like, I looked at the defense right now, guys like Dan Girardi, Ben Lovejoy, Dion Phaneuf, all over 34 or over. You think they're taking a PTO? I don't think so. I think they're taking, a 1-year guaranteed offer for as much money as they can get, which might not be a lot, but Toronto could lose out on those guys who would help them on their bottom pairing because they can't allocate any more money until they know how much Mitch Marner is going to.
By the way, they should sign Dan Girardi yesterday.
I think so too. That's
a move that would make them a better team for sure. Yeah, but and I know Russ. What do you agree? Do you agree with that one?
No, I agree with that. But
bottom pairing.
It's bottom pairing, but it would cost more than it would eat into what they might have to give Marner, and then it would cause bigger problems.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, and so right now they can't do anything. They know that. Marner knows that too. Marner is a team player. He is a team guy. He is listening to his agent and his family right now.
All right, hold on.
Yeah,
we got to call a timeout here. When you have gone this long without signing your deal, you can't call him a team player anymore because it is affecting the team. That is a fact.
No, I don't totally disagree with you, Russ. I mean, but at the same time, it's
ask yourself this. Now, Nylander definitely will go further than Marner will this year, but Nylander affected the team and the season last year. That is a fact.
In a huge way. Probably, maybe preventing them from winning a Stanley Cup. I'm going to throw. I mean, and that sounds crazy, but I think that they should have finished higher, or they could have. If they're a better team by the time they play Boston, they win in that 7th game. I mean, there's a bunch of different things there.
Don't ignore the fact, and I will continue, and people will get sick of me saying this, but I'll continue to do so, that the Leafs were better last year before the Nylander signing. And I'm not saying that Nylander is not a good player, and I'm not saying he can't fit with the group.
Yeah, no. And that's hockey. I agree with you. That is the thing about our sport that no one wants to admit.
Right. But next year, and then, Kyle Dubas has been influenced by Masai Ujiri, the Raptors general manager, and his 1-year philosophy in terms of going out and trading for Kawhi Leonard and going for it. That a lot of people think that the Tyson Barrie trade was sort of his version of that, because Barrie is a UFA at the end of the year, and it got out there that he's going to look for $8 million in free agency. Well, honestly, if they've been spending all this time looking for a top 4 defenseman and they have success with Tyson Barrie, I'm sure Kyle Dubas is going to want to sign Tyson Barrie and keep him in Toronto. And the only way they can do that after they get Marner signed is to move out a contract, and that would be one William Nylander.
I don't disagree with that, and I think that the issue, I mean, the real disaster here is if Marner thing stretches into the season, affects their season, and then they have all these UFAs next year. They're really in a bind like this.
Talk about the Flyers coaching.
Yeah, I got to talk about that because I do have to go right at 2. But I want to talk about the Flyers first, for sure. Yeah, that. So I'm just learning this right now. So like I said, I didn't hear this. So you're saying that what they've done
is that they switched it up from what everybody thought would happen. And
Therrien, a defensive-minded coach who doesn't like forwards,
is in charge of the forwards.
Right. Good. Okay. And Yo, a offensive guy who teams have been horrendous defensively,
is in charge of the defense and the penalty kill.
Got it. I think. Okay. There you go.
Sounds like a recipe for success for me.
And I think Peter put it perfectly. And I've asked this question everywhere I try. We visited a lot of friends when we were traveling in different places across the country. Everyone asked me the same thing about this, and I say the Flyers will either win the Stanley Cup this year or fail miserably. And that is Alain Vigneault's thing, right? And it is.
He'll have a successful season. Vigneault always has a successful first season. He always does.
Yeah, he's like Guy Boucher.
I will tell you what this tells me more than anything else. They're not looking at these guys because these guys are both professional coaches. Yo should be able to coach forwards and defensemen. Therrien should be able to coach. They're both head coaches. They are specialists in one area, but okay. But what this tells me more than anything else is they're looking at personalities here. And so Therrien's personality, the way he rides forwards, someone should talk to Danny Briere over in Philadelphia.
If people think, Zach, your point about Paul Maurice being hard on players, you've got a trifecta there.
You've got three. This is obviously, this is, like I said before, this is a group that's put together
feels about Alain Vigneault.
Because the Flyers were horrendous in the first periods last year, coming out games. This is a group that the Flyers were lazy and depended on their talent to get them close at the end of games by coming back from trailing all the time. And that said to management that the Flyers are lazy in the beginning of games and don't come out and where they should, because they can, once they try to come back, they can do so. And they were incredible second half of games, horrible first half game team. So there is an issue though here with guys like, Giroux and Michel Therrien and how that's going to work, because Giroux is not he's not a Kachuk. Let's put it that way. Like Giroux, you know what I mean? Giroux's he's a great guy and a really, and a lead on the ice type of guy, but he's not going to be he's not the kind of guy that you want to get in his face every day, because I don't see him responding to that at all.
The fear there, and I'm agreeing with you on this, is that Giroux could sort of retreat into his own space completely.
And Giroux, who's friends with Briere and all, I mean, this is like completely setting up for a really bad situation. Remember, it's like these guys who, gosh, I know so many players. I mean, talk to the Penguins about Michel Therrien. Like I've talked to so many,
Which one, Scranton or the big club?
No, like talk to the Penguins that went to the Stanley Cup Finals with Michel Therrien before he was fired, right? Like that's like, this is like, talk to Crosby and talk to Malkin and talk to Billy Guerin and players like Guerin and people like that who were playing on the team back then. I'm going to tell you, like this is like, so this is going to there is no question that they are going to be riding the Flyers players. I mean, there's no question that. So this, to me, when you put Therrien up there, you're putting him up there for his personality, and you're putting him up there because Terrian's only method of coaching has always been the same. That is to make the team hate him and then hope the team bonds against that.
Right.
That is what he does. And he does it pretty well. Like that Canadiens team went to the Stanley Cup, went deep in the Stanley Cup. But if you remember, that was like they were riding on like guys like Bourque and Briere and players who were playing like hardly any minutes but scoring all the points in that playoff run. Mm-hmm. But because he tends to put his talented, skilled players back if he feels like they aren't playing a full game. So you're going to now tell.
You have to remember this, though, Ek.
Yeah.
All of this is true before Paul Holmgren left, and current management felt like this is what the team needed.
Yes.
So we can't say that these coaches are going to be acting independently and doing things that the team or the organization isn't aware of. They're completely aware of it. When you hire these guys, this is what you hired. You know that.
Yeah. No, and then Paul Holmgren not being around is like another thing, right? That's like a whole nother issue. Like that, and that also happened while I was away. But that's another thing altogether, because that is the one link back to Ed Snyder, basically.
Yeah.
He is the last remaining. Paul Holmgren is what he is because and only because of Ed Snyder. Ed Snyder made Paul Holmgren. into what he is. Like, and Paul has taken an incredible job. I couldn't thank the guy enough. He's a great guy. He did a really good job. But he is the only link to the old Flyers thing that Flyers fans all.
Yeah, it's gone. It's all
gone. So now you're looking and you're looking at a very, very different. You're looking at a very, very hard-assed approach, which is and not that like Fred Sheeran, those guys weren't hard-assed coaches, but this is a team that isn't built that way. These players aren't built that way, and the funny thing, they trade away one of their only players who is in Gudas, right? So this is like really not a group that's going to be.
You could see Braun's built that way.
Oh yeah, and Braun's built that way, and I think
he dealt with Trotz, so he could deal with that.
What I think the Flyers need is more ex-Minnesota Wild players.
That's the other thing, and then obviously the PTO and all that stuff, that's fine, but because PTOs are what they are, like I wrote today,
that's a favor.
They are a favor, and they are like a chance to like. I remember one time Brian Briard was a PTO with the Flyers, left in between. I found out left after the first period because of a preseason game at the Spectrum. It was like one of the last things ever done at the Spectrum.
Yeah.
Brian Berard, who was a PTO, left after the first period because the Islanders or somebody wanted to talk to him. I forget who it was.
Oh, no, if you remember, there was the guy who left the Flyers game in the first period and was signed by the Wild, I think, by the end of the night.
By the end of the game, right? Like that. PTOs are bizarre in the preseason. That's what they are. Yeah. I think that I like Chris Stewart. I actually think it's not a bad idea to bring him in on a PTO, but I don't think he's going to end up on the Flyers.
I think it's a Lehigh signing, if anything.
Even that.
It's also one of those things where you can rest your vets because he's got enough NHL experience. Because
you have to play X amount of vets in the preseason game.
True.
That's a great point, and people don't know enough how much teams hate that rule. But there is a rule out there that you have to play X amount of pro players with experience.
4 preseason games, slightly longer training camp, not dealing with travel and stuff. Let's go. That's it. That's all you need.
Two things here I wanted to touch on quickly.
One, let's go.
The contract, Russ, that JT Compher signed with Colorado, 4 years, $3.5 million, in the same range of like some of the other deals that we've seen, but brings him to free agency. A 4-year deal, walks him right to UFA. But if you look at he said 2 decent years, but he's not a big scorer, and 3.5 is a little rich.
Well, he's never going to be a big scorer. He also makes his money on faceoffs and defensive play. He's a defensive shutdown guy. He'll play against your best. And so he's really good at those other 2 things too. That's why he got that money, not so much for the goals he's getting. The goals he's getting is something that he can do, but it's not his number one thing to do.
But Sakic is really good. Sakic's really good at putting together a balanced team. That's what he does.
And that O'Reilly deal keeps paying off for them because he was part of that deal along with Zadorov. Yeah. So
that deal, we can't even talk about that deal anymore.
The other one, you have to look at the inventiveness of the capologists in this league. When you look at that Ottawa-Chicago deal, the Anisimov for Zach Smith.
Yeah.
Ottawa gets a $9.1 million cap hit on Anisimov the next 2 years for basically they got a coupon because they're paying $3.5 million of that in real money to Anisimov over the next 2 years. After he got paid a signing bonus by Chicago, he makes $2 million this year and $1.5 million next year, and they get a cap hit of over $9 million. So that's typical Eugene Melnyk getting more bang for his buck in terms of not having to pay out actual money for actual talent. Yeah. Whereas Chicago, they're looking to decrease the cap hit. Zach Smith makes $3.25 million. They're paying more money than they're paying to Anisimov, but the cap hit is lower. So both teams in that deal, it works out for both of them.
I want to quickly, before we go, it just was announced too that, you guys saw this probably, but officially now, tweeted out by NHL.com that Ron Francis is the GM of the Seattle Krakens. And as I'm going to keep going.
Wearing that 32 jersey,
Seattle Sasquatch, Seattle Kraken. I'm going to come up. There's got to be one. Those are the only 2 options. Is it the Totems? No, don't tell me. Don't tell me they've been named while I've been away. I don't know.
No, they haven't done. Don Cherry said he wants it to be the Totems, so we know that it'll happen.
I didn't know Cherry said that, but I've heard that's a rumor.
I've heard that rumor too. I don't like it.
I'm
sorry.
Totem.
I'm sorry. That's just like, I've known quite a few defensemen who've been called totem poles in their own zone, and that's not a compliment.
Are you talking about a current Flyers defenseman? Not current, a former Flyers.
They should sign. They should.
We skate around like a totem pole. No big deal.
Oh my God.
I've heard that
where
mentioned.
Tyler Meyer should have ended up.
I've heard that more than once. So that's a terrible, terrible thought. Not a stagnant piece of wood standing in the middle of the desert is not a hockey mascot.
I always referred to them as pylons, and of course the Flyers were the right color.
Right, they were. Well, there were a couple of them too. But anyway, this is Ron Francis. Just real quick, I'm glad he's getting another chance. Obviously, he's a good guy. I don't know about. Here's what I'm going to say about like signing this kind of a GM to an expansion job. Okay, an ex-player. And this is I'm a little bit against ex-player GMs, and it's not really fair of me, but I am somewhat because this is not really what they do. Like this is I mean, and he's been a GM. What was that?
It is now,
and he's done it for a while. I know that, but there are
a few now, and
he's a smart guy and everything like that, and he'll probably do fine. But I really liked, when I looked at what happened in Vegas, you bring in a GM like that.
Well, like he's a former player.
He's a former player, but he was a GM for a lot longer. Okay, like he's been a GM for. He was more a GM than a player. Like Francis is more of a player than a GM, and
he's just more of a famous player. That's what you're getting.
He's more of a famous player, but but also McPhee, definitely was But McPhee had so much, like 25 years or whatever experience with the Capitals, right? Like just an incredible amount. Like to me, like a David Poile type guy. That's what I want to start an expansion team. Like I want somebody who's seen the entire life cycle of this thing, of players, of teams, of how it works from the beginning to end.
You're saying to the other GMs in the league, if you were an above average player, you don't want to hire them as a GM. But if you were a below average player, you'll be a good GM. Come on, man.
No, I want an experienced GM for my job. Like, and Francis has been a GM, but how many years was Francis a GM? 5?
No,
3.
Matt.
In Carolina, how many years was he a GM in Carolina?
6 or 7, something like that.
7. All right, 7. But that's not enough to me to see the whole life cycle of a team. Like to see a team that goes through players from the point that player is a prospect to the point that player retires. I want to see those kind of GMs that just see the whole thing of it, and that to me that would be a lot. Now I don't know how many of those guys are out there right now, and there's not a lot of them out there. But I think that, I'm a little bit. I guess it's going to matter who Francis brings in to help him. In my opinion, that's going to help. That's going to matter a lot. Like McCrimmon did a great job, but McCrimmon they did it the perfect way. McPhee built this thing from the ground up, and now McCrimmon can take over. That to me was the perfect. But if it had been McCrimmon from the beginning, I would have had issues with it because it's like that there's so much experience. Like what McPhee did was impressive.
That's fair. I mean, I agree with you on that.
So I don't know. I think we'll see. I do have to go, guys. And I'm sorry. We have so many good questions in the chat room. Do me a favor, guys. Save the questions for tomorrow, and we will get to them for sure. There were so many good questions. I do apologize. We'll be back again tomorrow. And but remember, without the buzz, folks, it's just hockey. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's see what happens. Look for offer sheets.